Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Civil Point Podcast with me, your host, Ariana Dieva. And guess what? We are back with a brand new episode. And today we are going to talk about Kamala and everything she's done since she lost the presidency, the election of 2024. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how she chose to do a book tour over saving and signing the life support papers for democracy. I'm very upset with her choices. From a personal standpoint, do I understand that she needs her breathing room? She needs time to decompress from that very stressful 107 days. Absolutely. I get it from a personal standpoint. But from a professional standpoint, there's no rest for the weary. There's no rest for Kamala Harris in this instance. She was the former vice president. She ran as a presidential candidate selection for the Democratic Party. And her taking that step back after the election, and now we're 9 months into this presidency and seeing how hard-hitting this presidency has attacked democracy at its core to centralizing our government power to the president of the United States by letting our institutions like our judicial system fall to the gripping hands of Con Don. Like, she chose to come back with a book tour. She didn't come back with a fighting stance against Donald Trump. She didn't come back with a fighting stance against the MAGA movement and fascism. She came back with a book called 107 Days. I don't understand it. Especially if we're going to be going into this next election cycle and run. At this point, I don't think she has a chance of now running because she didn't run into back in. I understand taking a break. I understand taking a break from the stress that you were under in that election period, in that 107 days. I get it. I don't get stepping back into the political landscape that we are currently in and advertising and panhandling a book around the United States instead of standing tall and fighting for the democracy that's crumbling before your eyes. So, as a fighter, I don't see her as a strong presidential candidate for the 2028 election. That's if we even have a free and fair 2028 election. Now, do I want to read her book? Absolutely. I'm very interested in Kamala's book. I'm super interested and I can't wait to get my hands on it and read it. I think it's intriguing to see how that process was, being that Joe Biden dropped out of the race and she had to step in as the Democratic nominee. And I think everyone knows my feelings on Kamala. Do I fully support that woman? No, I don't think she's a strong enough opponent, and I did not initially think that she was a strong enough opponent to defeat Donald Trump, and I was right. But as soon as the world said she's going to be the Democratic nominee, I stuck by her side like that because that is what we need, especially in the Democratic Party, with the dissension and confusion going on currently. We need to stick by one candidate, and right now I believe that candidate is Gavin Newsom, but that's a whole nother conversation. I feel like her return into the political landscape and atmosphere just blew the air out of the balloon. It blew the air out of the balloon because she needed to come back strong. She needed to come back fighting for democracy, fighting against fascism, fighting against the MAGA movement, fighting against the possibility of the rumors that this election was rigged in Donald Trump's defense. So for her to come back with a book, it disheartens me because it shows where her priorities lie. And I understand you got to put your mind and sanity first, but when democracy is on the docket to be kicked out of the United States and moved in with a fascist movement, with a dictator, it's not time for a book tour. I would have appreciated that book maybe when we kicked fascism's ass. I would have appreciated a book maybe 20 years down the line where you want to line up how you defeated Donald Trump in 2028. I just don't think this was the appropriate time or setting for her to release a book, given the political landscape that we are currently in, given the fact that our democracy is up for literal termination at this point, because we have a dictator not in training anymore, but a dictator in form in the White House, peddling fascism into every sector of our country. So, I don't know. I do want to read the book. I'm interested in her 107 Days. I just think it's a bad timing for her to bring this on out when we have such a volatile political landscape. But what I do want to do is watch her interview with Rachel Maddow, because I'm very interested to see what she said. Like I said, she's on a book tour right now. Instead of saving democracy, this girl is on a book tour, and, you know, get your coins where you can, but just don't expect to run in 2028 and have my support. My support is against someone who's going to be a strong candidate against someone who is trying to ruin our country, not for someone who is trying to peddle and panhandle a book through the United States to give her reasoning as to why she lost the election. That's my opinion. And it may be harsh, but I had my opinion before she was the Democratic nominee. I stood by her after she was the Democratic nominee, and I stood by her after she lost that election. But her deciding to go on a book tour instead of coming in ramming and trying to spearhead the fascism that's taken place and taken over the United States, that's where she has officially lost me. And I don't want to see her running in the 2028 election at all. So, I am interested in her 107 Days book. I am also interested in this interview. So, let's go ahead and get to this interview with Rachel Maddow and Kamala Harris.
Election that you did not win. Joining us now for her first news interview since the election is former Vice President Kamala Harris. Madam Vice President, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
It's good to see you.
It's good to be here.
It's weird to talk about you with you sitting here and me pretending you're not here.
Oh, it was awkward for me, too. It's okay.
How have you been?
I am well, yeah, all things considered.
Yeah.
I am well.
How have you been taking care of yourself since the election?
You know, I have an incredible family. I've been spending more time with them than I had for quite some time, cooking, and writing, and reflecting, and, you know, talking to a lot of people, making a lot of calls, receiving a lot of calls. So I've been busy.
Let me talk to you about this capitulation thing.
Yep.
This really landed with me. I feel like we're all in the middle of it, but you articulating it in the way that you do, you've become the patron saint of I told you so, in terms of people understanding the sort of warnings and predictions that you made about what Trump would be like. But you say, I predicted all of that. I warned of it. What I didn't predict was the capitulation. The billionaires lining up to grovel, the big media companies, universities, so many major law firms, I will note, including your husband's.
Yeah, and he spoke out about it.
He's been very vocal in criticizing it. He said they've all been bending to blackmail and outrageous demands.
Yeah.
Why did you not predict the capitulation? And what do you make of the effort to try to put some steel in the spine of those institutions?
So, as you know, I am a lifelong public servant. And but I've worked closely with the private sector over many years. And I always believed that if push came to shove, those titans of industry would be guardrails for our democracy, for the importance of sustaining democratic institutions. And one by one, they have been silent. They have been, you know, yes, I use the word feckless. It's not like they're going to lose their yacht or their house in the Hamptons. And here's the thing. Democracy sustains capitalism. Capitalism thrives in a democracy. And right now we are dealing with, as I called him at my speech on the ellipse, a tyrant We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now in Donald Trump. And these titans of industry are not speaking up. And perhaps it is because his threats and the way he has used the weight of the federal government to take out vengeance on his critics is something that they fear, and I get that. I understand why they do. We've seen the demonstration of it. Perhaps it is because they want to please him and nominate him for a Nobel Prize. Perhaps it's because they want a merger approved or they want to avoid an investigation. But at some point, they've got to stand up for the sake of the people who rely on all of these institutions to have integrity and to, at some point, be the...
See, here's my thing with this, is that she's telling people to stand up, but she's been silent for the last 9 months. She has been in her cocoon writing a book for the last 9 months. I'm not attacking her. I'm not attacking her thought process. I don't know her. I don't know her thought process. But to say other people need to stand up when you sat down because you lost an election, it's very, again, hypocritical. You're coming in after the fact, after the damage, and trying to say to other people they should have acted and should act differently. When it comes to the capitulation of law firms, when it comes to the capitulation of, entities, as well as businesses, as well as our judicial system, judges, I mean, from every sector, every power sector that the United States has, there's been capitulation with this tyrant, this dictator. And I don't think it stems as much from fear as more as it stems from a view of it being an opportunity to succeed for their law firm, for their business, for their entity, for their career. It's a sellout. It's a sellout. I feel Donald Trump sold America out to Russia, right? And now our constituents in the United States and big businesses and big tech, our judges, our justice system, are now selling the American people out for their own gain. It's not about capitulation in regards to fear. It's about capitulation in regards to assets. It's not about fear. It's about what can I do for me now to save myself, because I see that ship sinking. I see that Titanic sinking. How do I get on this lifeboat and get the F out of here? That's what's happening in the United States currently. It's not about fear with these big entities, with big business, with big tech, with law firms. It's not about fear. It's about how do I save myself and get the F out of here, because I see where this is going.
Guardrails against a tyrant who is using the federal government to execute his whim and fancy because of a fragile ego.
Correct.
I know that your parents took you to
I don't care about her
decades of work. Federalist Society,
House has been very aggressive,
we know about
pushing
her,
Republican-led states to gerrymander
we
their
know about
maps
her
to
past.
Effectively give Republicans a major edge heading into the midterms next year. That has led to related responsive Democratic efforts, including in your home state of California. Do you support Democrats' effort to kind of fight fire with fire there? Will you be involved in that California measure, for example?
I absolutely support it. You mentioned Gavin earlier. By the way, Gavin has a great sense of humor, so he's going to be fine. But
did you warn him about the hiking thing? You did.
Yeah,
okay.
I've known Gavin forever. He literally has a great sense of humor. But let me say about what he is doing with redistricting, it is absolutely the right way to go. Part of what we've got to, I think, challenge ourselves to accept is that we tend to play by the rules. But I think this is a moment where you got to fight fire with fire.
Fight evil with evil.
And so what Gavin is doing, what the California legislature is doing, what those who are supporting it are doing to say, you know what, you want to play? Then let's get in the field, let's get in the arena, and let's do this. And I support that.
Speaking of...
Good. And she should support that, because at this point, we need to fight fire with fire. The only way to defeat evil is sometimes to be just as evil. If they're going to go low, go to hell, because we're not going to win when people have just an illogical sense of being, when people are just ignorant. You can't fight ignorance with education, because ignorance doesn't know what education is. So when it comes to this political landscape, Gavin Newsom has it correct, and he's the first one to really initiate and go after Don in the way he has, in mimicking his tirades on Twitter. And you have Fox News hosts going insane about Gavin Newsom mimicking Donald. And it's like the hypocrisy. Do you not see what this man is doing? He's holding a mirror to your face, and you don't like what you see. So I'm glad that she said she's here for it, because I'm here for it too. I think she would be a great background measure in regards to the 2028 election. I just don't think she needs to be the face of the Democratic Party. I didn't think she was strong enough when they elected her as the Democratic nominee in 2024. And I just don't think she will be strong enough after this book tour to be a nominee for the 2028 presidential election. And I hope everyone who is watching this, if anyone is watching this, understands that if we have an election in 2028, if we have a free and fair election in 2028, we will lose again if Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee. Just saying. All right, we're going to go ahead and continue on here.
Particularly when it's so ridiculous, it's funny. How do you decide when to not take the bait and stay off the terms that he's trying to set for the debate, and when to punch back? What did you learn about that in the process of going up against him?
So, early, I also talk about, the first 2 weeks that I was the top of the ticket, we had no polling, because no polling had been done on me. So it was my gut.
Yeah.
And so I came up with this speech that actually was about, I was a prosecutor. I dealt with people who engaged in sexual abuse. I was attorney general. I took on people who engaged in fraud, on and on and on. And so I know his type.
I remember this line, yeah.
And because there is, there's something about in the English language that phrase, I know his type, that does a lot of work for you.
Mm-hmm.
So in regards to her campaign and her campaign messages, I know his type. I am realizing that we are currently in a world right now where facts don't matter. Facts are irrelevant to perception. And it's very scary. And I am beginning to realize this at my age for the first time in my life. And I had an experience today where I realized that facts don't matter in this world that we live in. It's a perception you put out and the rhetoric that people believe that matters. Can you make disinformation believable enough to capture an audience in a manner that is more egotistical rather than truthful and reliant? That is the world we live in currently. And I had this epiphany, I had this realization, and I had this smashed in the wall moment today about that. And I was like, I was told that someone's perception of a situation is okay to be talked about, even if there's direct facts to back up that situation that refutes and contradicts their perception. I was told they're allowed to say whatever they want to say. I was like, that's called defamation. If there's facts to a case, you can't argue the facts against someone's perception and say their perception is valid when the facts contradicts their perception. It blew my mind and shattered my reality of what we are currently living in and how evil, like MAGA, thrives because facts don't matter in this reality, in this world that we are currently living in this dimension we branched off to. Facts and reality and people who have specialists and degrees and study and things of that nature, these facts don't matter. It's about the perception, it's about the fraud, it's about the grandeur, and it's about how it's presented and how people can digest it. That is what matters. Not factual evidence. It's about what is easily digestible, even if it's fraudulent. So we're going to go ahead and continue on to this interview because it's just so, it's been a crazy few
how it's handled.
Months.
You say in part, page 46,
facts.
It's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra, as if we'd all been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision. Whose decision should that have been? How should that decision have been made?
So when I write this, it's because I realize that I have and had a certain responsibility that I should have followed through on. Which is, and so when I talk about the recklessness, as much as anything, I'm talking about myself. There was so much, as we know, at stake. And as I write, you know, the where my head was at the time is that it would come off as being completely self-serving.
If you said to President Biden that you did not think he should run again.
Yeah, or even that he should question whether it's a good idea. But I think that, you know, one of the reasons I wrote this book, Rachel, is there are actually a number of reasons. One is that it is unprecedented, right? To your point of what you said in your opening, we had a president of the United States running for re-election, 3.5 months from the election, decides not to run. The sitting vice president enters the race against a former president of the United States who's been running for 10 years.
It's unprecedented.
With 107 days to go.
I give it to her.
And it ended up being the closest presidential election in the 21st century. And there was so much about those 107 days that, for me, and this is really a behind the scenes.
The margins say otherwise on that. I think that is a big statement for her to make. If in the next few months we get really valid evidence that some states had a misrepresentation in voter counts, such as Pennsylvania and Nevada, I think her making that statement by such a close margin is going to be, I don't think anyone will remember it because, you know, MAGA, you know, they don't have brains. But I don't think she necessarily lost the presidential election. I think that there were factors that contributed to her loss, not that she lost herself. Again, do I think she was a strong candidate from the start? No, I think she was thrown into the fire, and I'm not giving that to her as an excuse. She just said it, that it's unprecedented what she did, which it is, but unprecedented and winning are two different things. It would have been unprecedented, and I would have looked up to her even more if she won. But it was unprecedented. She lost, and she took time off, and now she's on a book tour.
Look at those 107 days was about seeing people who seemingly had nothing in common coming together by the thousands with a level of optimism and, dare I say, joy about the possibilities for America. And I hope
She's
to
right. There was a lot
remind
of
people
joy and
about
hope.
that light that people brought to it, and to remind people that that light is still there. And we can't let that be extinguished by an election or the individual who's in the office right now. Because to the
will
point
not
of all
say
those
his
folks who
name.
got out and protest about the Kimmel suspension.
And about everything else that people have protested.
Right. In the variety of ways, whether it be going to a protest or being, with their pocketbook or getting engaged in local and state and federal elections, they'll make a difference. And they've made a difference. And I guess the last point is that we've got to really remember that this person who's in the White House
She will not say his
promised
name.
a whole lot of people who supported him and voted for him that he would do one thing, which is bring down costs and prices.
And he did not.
And he lied
on
to them.
day one.
And we need to remember that as we move forward with the next series of elections. The midterms are around the corner. That
one thing I want to say here is that we can't throw their missteps in their face. That's going to send them the other direction to MAGA even more. We can't say that he lied to you and no, we told you so. We can't say Kamala was right about everything. We can't say, Newsom was right about everything with his red hats, his gimmick hats. That will send them to the right even more. We have to try and find a medium balance in a way to get these right-wing people who are seeing what Donald Trump is doing is destructive and bring them over to our side in a way that is compassionate, that's saying, we see how you're hurting. We understand that the lies that were fed to you were lies, and we're not blaming you anymore, but we want you to join us and fix the issue. The message should be we need to join together to fix the diabolical franchise that is tyranny and fascism in the United States that is presented by Donald, not by his voters. We need to try and sympathize with them in some way without forgiving them for their missteps. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's a way to tell someone that they're wrong without throwing it in their faces. There's a way to show someone that they were wrong without ostracizing and exiling them from feeling included in a future of a country. Yes, on the left, we support nothing but, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, everyone's rights. But we did take a margin of miss when we didn't address the issues that stemmed from middle America and white working class men, especially young white working class men who don't have the opportunity to have an education that could propel them into a job that is high earning. So we need to find a way to find that balance going into the midterms and going into the 2028 election to say, hey, you don't need to admit you were wrong, but all you need to do is show some action to fix it. That's all we need to do. That's all we need to say. We don't need to yell at them. And yes, I know I say maggots are stupid all the time, but we do need to find that medium to say, you don't need to say you were wrong. You just need to put action and put your boots to the ground and say, we're going to fix this, because we can't allow a dictator to run the United States of America, which was founded on a democracy and the rights to the people, and more importantly, the Constitution that protects the people.
it's not just about him by himself. There were others around him who perpetuated that same promise and have not followed through. They're about to go into negotiations around the continuing resolution, the budget.
Yep.
And I know that leaders Schumer and Jeffries are going to meet with the president, I think in the Oval Office. And good for them to go there and ask Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to justify why he is proposing to cut Medicaid, why he is willing to shut down the government for the sake of putting on the backs of working people the tax cut he gave to the richest people in America.
Do you think that Democrats should vote to allow the government to shut down in order to try to extract concessions from Trump on these matters?
It won't be the Democrats who are shutting it down. It'll be the Republicans. The Democrats are doing the job that any elected leader should do, which is to say, we're not going to do the bidding of the President of the United States at the sacrifice of our constituents' health care. Negotiate.
Is there room
You
to
described
negotiate,
in the
though,
book
at this
something that
point?
you called a secret project that you ran as vice president,
Yeah.
that you called the STARS Project,
Yeah. Ooh,
what's this?
identifying up and coming talent in the Democratic Party. You'd meet with them, ask them about their interests. You say that more than one of them said they felt like they were being called to the principal's office when you asked them to come in. But the folks who you met with in this way include some of the people who you see very frequently now on MSNBC: Jasmine Crockett, Angela Also Brooks, Maxwell Frost, Robert Garcia Moore. Arguably the fastest rising star right now in Democratic politics is Zohran Mamdani, who is going to be elected mayor of New York City, and probably in a landslide if the polls are anything to go by. Lots of mainline Democrats have been very shy about his candidacy.
I know exactly where she's going with this question, and this is a good question. I'm here for
They
it.
seem somewhat flummoxed by his success. As a sort of talent spotter in the Democratic Party, what do you think of him and his candidacy, and what do you think of mainline Democratic shyness and agitation about the prospect that he's going to win?
Look, as far as I'm concerned, he's the Democratic nominee and he should be supported.
Do you endorse his candidacy?
I support the Democrat in the race, sure. But let me just say this.
That was not a good answer, Kamala. That was not a good answer. Do I support the Democrat? Sure. What? Stand strong in your conviction. You wanted people to support you. You wanted people to back you when you were thrown into the election race 107 days out from election night. So where's that same energy for Zohran Mamdani? So this is what I'm talking about, hypocrisy on both sides. It's not just the Republicans and the maggots. It also exists on the Democratic Party. That was a very nonchalant, sure, we're going to support him.
He's not the only star. I know that, he's in New York, and I know New Yorkers think they're the center of the world, and here we are in New York having this interview.
It is the biggest city in the country.
And I love New York, as the saying goes. I really do. But, there are people like Barbara Drummond in Mobile, Alabama, Helena Moreno in New Orleans. They're all running for mayor, too, and they...
Okay, so here's my problem with the Democratic Party. Again, like I said before, it's about perception. And right now, if Zohran Mamdani has so much potential and backing behind him with just constituents in regards to the general public, why not promote him and use that popularity to soar through our government, to make sure that he is elected the mayor of New York City, to make sure his policies are implemented, to make sure he's protected because of how many racist comments and racist people are after him. So to sit here and say, yeah, I support him, but there are other stars in the Democratic Party, I think that's a dangerous thing to put forth if you are Kamala Harris. I just think it's dangerous. I think you need to stand strong with who the public, who the Democrats' public chooses. Not sit here and say, this is why we lost the election. What are we doing? What are we doing? We're going to pick some random girl from Alabama to flagship the Democratic Party, or are we going to pick someone who's a superstar, has the traction behind him, like Zohran Mamdani, and sent him flying to the moon? It's what happened with Trump. He had a personality, he had a message, and everyone backed him and soared him to the moon, or soared him to the White House to introduce fascism into the United States. that's the playbook that wins. We can't take someone from Mobile, Alabama and say, this is what America looks like, when no one knows this person from Mobile, Alabama. And I think that's what happened when she chose her running mate in Tim Walz. I didn't know who Tim Walz was. If she picked Pete Buttigieg, like, that would have maybe made a difference. And I heard in her book, she wrote a little excerpt about Pete Buttigieg. But we'll digress on that. But yeah, just focus on the people that's popular with the people, not in your own opinion of a party. Yes, you can have your own opinion. Yes, you can endorse other people. But when your general public is saying, this is our guy, support that guy.
They are stars. So I hope that we don't so over-index on New York City that we lose sight of the stars throughout our country who are right now running for mayor and many other offices, governor, and so on. So that's where I am. We got a big tent. And we got a lot of stars.
2026 is shaping up to be an election that is going to be filled with Democratic primaries, though. And a lot of mainline Democrats in their 70s and 80s are going to be facing challengers in their 30s. Yeah. Do you think Democrats are at all justified in their frustration with there being so many older Democrats in elected office? Do you think it is time for the oldest Democrats in elected office to be thinking kind of wholesale as a category about the need to retire and move on from office?
Correct. I do.
You know, I wouldn't overgeneralize on that, meaning that there are some Democrats.
I think it depends on the Democrats that are in the office and if they actually have done their job and done their service to the people. If you have older, it's not about age. It's not about likability in that sense. It's about, have you done your job in the tenure amount of years you've been there? Have you done your job successfully to help the people that you are supposed to be helping and representing? If the answer is no to that, then you need to be out the door. If the answer is yes, then I think you should obviously run for re-election in whatever position you're in. I think that's what it boils down to.
You know, older in age, but very young in terms of how they are thinking, and very bold in terms of how they're thinking. I think that every one of the candidates is going to be judged based on whether they actually have a plan, whether they see the people, whether they're listening to them, whether they offer something that feels dynamic and bold, especially at this moment, whether they have the fight in them to fight what we know to be wrong, but also the fight to fight for something. I think that's how they're going to be judged. I don't know that the voters are going to judge strictly on somebody's age.
I have much more to ask you.
Okay, I'm here.
Madam Vice President, the book is called 107 Days. It comes to political enemies, including firing prosecutors who told the administration there was not an evidentiary predicate to bring those charges. We've also now, in an executive order today, we've got the president describing Antifa, the anti-fascist, it's not even really a movement, the anti-fascist tactics of a portion of the protest movement as a domestic terrorist organization. What is your...
Don't you love how Donald Trump labels literally everything? Donald Trump labels literally everything domestic terrorism that isn't white Christian nationalism. Transgenders, terrorists. Antifa, terrorists. Everything that is not white Christian nationalism is terrorism. And if you flip the tables, if you just support white Christian nationalism, that's called terrorism. That's called domestic terrorism, especially when you have Fox News hosts going on live TV and throwing out domestic terrorist threats to bomb the UN, which is located on domestic soil in New York. Like, come on, the hypocrisy of it all. The hypocrisy of it all.
Your reaction to those things, what do you think the appropriate response is to things like that?
Well, in normal times, we should and could expect that our courts would step in,
but they're not,
when asked to declare the legality or illegality of what the president is doing, because
they're
Civics
beholden
101,
to the
we all
president,
know.
so they won't.
We designed our democracy through 3 co-equal branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the courts, the judicial. And I would like to believe that that is still something that is standing. Certainly at the local level, you can see where the various courts have actually provided the guardrails against his abuse of power, against President Trump's abuse of power. The lower courts have been more inclined to step up. But my fear is that as some of those cases reach the United States Supreme Court, that we can't necessarily count on precedent to dictate how they will rule on the president's power. And again, Rachel, we talked about this during those 107 days, because remember, the court before the election basically said that the president of the United States would be immune from whatever he did in office. So he walked in to the White House with what he thinks is a blank check.
A blank check and a golden ticket to power.
Specifically in the Justice Department, that immunity ruling effectively told him he can direct the Justice Department to do whatever he wants, which he's now doing online, telling them to bring baseless prosecutions. But,
there are a couple of things that have happened this week, and every week we should take note when they do. But one, again, we've talked about the response to the Kimmel suspension.
Also, I want to note that even though he's doing these things and weaponizing the Department of Justice, there is such thing as vindictive prosecution that occurs. And because of vindictive prosecution, you would have to prove that the claims that you are putting in court documents for a trial or a case are true and have merit and brought in good faith, not because you're trying to maliciously prosecute someone for revenge or vengeance. So that's when the courts have to say, not even stand back, but stand up and say, we're not doing this because this is vindictive and malicious prosecution, and we cannot support this as a court of the United States within our justice system, because our roles don't support that. Our roles don't allow us to decide on cases that don't have merit within our justice system. So it's up to our courts to also stand up to this erratic tyrant and make sure that our justice system is upheld. And she's correct, in our lower courts, it's being fought. But when it comes to our Supreme Court, which is the law of the land, and when cases get decided, case law is then enumerated within our life, it's hard to now rely on the Supreme Court when cases get brought in front of the Supreme Court for them to uphold democracy, for them to uphold precedent, for them to uphold any standard that allows people to exist in our world, let alone a standard for just law in general, to make sure that our government, our president, doesn't have unchecked power. And unfortunately, they gave this man unchecked power when they decided on that immunity case.
But the other is that U.S. attorney who was appointed by the president, is a Republican, and said, I'm not doing it. And as a former prosecutor, one of the things I know, whether people like it or not, is prosecutors, for the most part, especially if they've been doing it for a while, are apolitical and take seriously their oath to do justice without fear or favor, and to do what they believe is the right thing to do based on the facts and the law. And we have seen this week evidence of someone who I'm sure didn't vote for me, and we may disagree on a whole lot of other stuff, but he had the courage to stand up and say he's going to follow his oath and do what is ethically right. So let's take heart and hope that others within the Department of Justice we'll see that is, have a something that steers their conscience.
An epiphany.
Let's not also be distracted by the fact that there are going to be the career people who understand that, but then Trump is appointing people to these positions who have no experience as a prosecutor. And the closest they have to it is their experience defending him against crimes, and are now sitting behind the desk making decisions about who should be charged with what. So it is a scary time. I don't mean to suggest otherwise, but there are these moments that we should also take note of.
Yes, and there have been, to that point, there have been multiple Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys who have resigned or left office under these circumstances.
Yes, they have. Yes, they have.
Let me ask you a politics question. I mentioned in the intro tonight that you say in the book really bluntly that your personal first choice for your running mate would have been Pete Buttigieg, and you praise him effusively. You say he would have been an ideal partner if I were a straight man. And you say effectively that demographically it was too much to ask of the American people to ask them to elect you with him as your running mate. I wonder if his reaction to that, since this part of the book has come out, if you've had any reflection on that, or I guess I'd ask you to just elaborate on that a little bit. It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
With you running as, you're the first woman elected vice president. You're a black woman and a South Asian woman elected to that high office, very nearly elected president. To say that he couldn't be on the ticket effectively because he was gay is hard to hear.
No. That's not what I said. That he couldn't be on the ticket because he is gay. My point,
I was about to say, discrimination.
As I write in the book, is that I was clear that in 107 days, in one of the most hotly contested elections for president of the United States, against someone like Donald Trump who knows no floor, to be a black woman running for president of the United States and as a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the stakes being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk.
I'm very upset with that statement from her, because Biden could have said the same thing about you in 2020, that it was an extreme risk, given the highly contextual, given the highly contentious state of our democracy in 2020 and who was running. Biden could have said the same thing about you. Biden could have said, well, as a black woman, it would be a high risk for you to run with me. So let me do the safe choice and choose a white man. And that's what you did. You essentially discriminated against Pete Buttigieg because he was gay. If he was not gay, then he would have been your running choice. That's exactly what you said. So to backtrack on that and try and smooth over that opinion, you can't, because it's the truth. It's in there. State your truth. This is what I felt at the time. Was it the right choice? No. I personally don't think it was the right choice. I think a lot of people would have been happy at that time to see a black woman and a gay man on a ticket. And I think a lot of people would have turned out even more to vote for you guys. And I think what turned a lot of people away was your choice of Tim Walz on that ticket as your running mate for vice president. Because who is Tim Walz? No one has heard of Tim Walz. I think it was a bad choice for her not to choose Pete Buttigieg. And I thought it was a horrible choice for her not to choose what's his name? Josh Shapiro or Joseph Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Like, I think it was a horrible choice. I think she had a unique opportunity to make history, and she chose a safe route that didn't get her to the destination. And that's sad to me. That's sad that she chose, in her own sense, she doesn't want to admit it, but discrimination, because she felt it was too much of a risk.
No matter how, I've been an advocate and an ally of...
And I'm not saying she's not an advocate and an ally for the LGBTQ plus community. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying she let her fear of risk win over her opportunity for a reward with Pete Buttigieg.
Of the LGBT community my entire life. So it wasn't about any prejudice on my part, but
that
we had such a short period of time. And the stakes were so high.
I remember when she said Tim Walz, and I said, who the f*** is that? Who the f*** is Tim Walz? Why didn't she pick Shapiro or Buttigieg? Like, two very strong choices for candidacy to run on that ticket.
Is a phenomenal public servant. Mm-hmm. And I think America...
a great representation.
...is and would be ready for that. But when I had to make that decision with 2 weeks to go, you know, and maybe I was being too cautious.
I think she was being too cautious.
I'll let our friends, we should all talk about that. Maybe I was.
She was, and I can say that hands down. You were being too cautious.
But that's the decision I made, and I, as with everything else in the book, I'm being very candid about that.
Yeah.
With a great...
I do give her props, though, for standing on her own merit here, because she's not truly backtracking, but I know she's not a bigot. Everyone knows Kamala Harris is not a bigot. But I do think she made the wrong choice in choosing Tim Walz over Pete Buttigieg or Shapiro.
A great deal of sadness about also the fact that it might have been a risk.
Will you consider running in 2028?
That's not my focus right now.
I know it's
not my focus at all.
That's not a no.
I know it really isn't.
Not a no.
Yeah. Well,
you know, when someone doesn't want to answer a question, if someone doesn't want to give a no or a yes, they're going to give a beat around the bush answer. And that's not my focus right now. It's not a no. And it's not a yes. It's a, let's see how this book tour turns out. And then let's see what I can do to stick a needle to Donald Trump and see what happens. I don't think she should run for election in 2028. I don't even think she should run on the ticket for even vice presidency. I think that she is a great public servant. I think she made history being the first Black vice president, being a woman. I think she did a lot for Black women, and I think she did a lot for minorities when she was in office as a representation. But I don't think she's a strong choice categorically for president or vice president going forward. Unless something changes in her demeanor, in her stance, in her fight, in her bark, in her claws, she's not a strong opponent to go up against possibly Donald Trump for a third time, because we know that's all in the Republicans' plan.
I know you're not considering it now, but are you saying, when you decided you're not going to run for governor of California?
Correct.
Were you saying you are never going to run for anything ever again, or were you just saying, I'm not going to run for that office right now?
That was the decision before me, and I made the decision not to run for governor of California. By the way, there are a lot of great candidates running, and I love my state, and we want somebody to definitely follow in the footsteps of Gavin in terms of standing up and understanding the power that California has to stand up to what we're saying in D.C.
As politic as you are being in those remarks, you are beautifully impolitic in this book in a way that makes it honest and...
I do appreciate Kamala's honesty. I think she was honesty. She had honesty in this interview with Rachel Maddow to a contentious point of understanding the volatility of her comments, the volatility of her deciding to do a book tour, and the volatility of her being in the position she was in as a running candidate as well as a losing candidate. I think she had to be very careful in this interview and in her book tour in general. I don't think she is a strong candidate going into the 2028 election. I don't think running should be her focus. I think she should play the background role. I think she should play the Kerry Washington. I think she should play the Olivia Pope and make sure things get done. At this point, it doesn't matter the face of the Democratic Party. It just matters that we take down and remove the fascist movement that MAGA has now implemented in our government and infiltrated to the deepest parts of our government, from our justice system to our House of Representatives. It's a clutch, it's a hold, it's a choke, it's a grip on what American democracy is. And not only is it a hold and a grip, it's choking the life out of it. So I don't think she is a strong candidate for the 2028 election, and I think she needs to work in the background and let someone like Gavin Newsom, who I think is a phenomenal possible candidate for the 2028 Democratic ticket in the 2028 election. I think he's fighting fire with fire, and as she supports, and I think whoever the Democratic nominee is come the 2028 election, if we have one, all Democrats need to get behind them. It can't be this game of, I want the spotlight. It has to be the, I want to save democracy. It's not about self-interest. It's about a nation's interest. And we need to make that very clear for anyone who's running against Donald Trump in 2028, because unless he is dead, I think he is going to try and manipulate the system to have a third term, and not only have a third term, but not even have an election come 2028. And if we do have an election and he's on the ticket, I can guarantee you it's not going to be a free and fair election. And I'm not saying it's going to be voter manipulation or ballot stuffing, anything like that. I'm just saying that it won't be a free and fair election to how people are able to access their vote or populate their vote in our systems. But I did like this interview with Kamala. I think it was solid. I think it was truthful. I think it won her some brownie points with me, but it's not going to win her an election. So move on, sis. Love you, support you, glad you made history, but take that book and go into the background and run some shit in the background and make history that way. Let someone else be the face of the country. Let someone else be the face of the Democratic Party. And right now, I think Gavin Newsom is that face we need, because he's fighting Donald Trump's antics with a mirror, and that's what we need. Anyway, guys, this is the end of this podcast episode. If you guys are here, thank you for joining me. If not, and you're watching this, go ahead. You can always go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because you don't want to miss out on any of the topics that I cover here on the Civil Point podcast. We talk about everything from daily life to politics, mostly because politics affects everyday life. If we are not always fighting for our right to exist in this country, the evil will win. So let's continue fighting. Let's continue remembering. Let's not blame. Let's not shout at the right. Let's invite them in to take action and understand that we still have a chance to save democracy. And we don't need a dictator. We need a president. Anyway, guys, have a good night, and I will talk to you guys on the next episode of the Civil Point podcast. I am your host, Ariana, and adios.